You can come up if you want. Come here. Hi guys, it's Jessica. I'm going to discuss something I probably should have tackled way back in February, March time. We're going to talk about the highest rated, most reviewed book I've read this year that I absolutely, positively hated and might be the #1 worst read of 2021. Nora Robert's The Awakening. I usually don't read books like this. It's usually all Kindle Unlimited. Stuff like this is a big budget spend for me. You can see I really made the most of having a physical copy. I wrote it, I annotated it, I have all these little stickies and information on them. Part of that is because I did do this as a buddy read and I expected to have a larger buddy conversation. I dragged so much on this book because I just hated it. It was so bad. I am a fan of Nora Roberts. I've read Nora Roberts' books before. I knew what I was getting into. Generally speaking, I really like it. This isn't like a down with Nora Roberts. This is down with The Awakening. It did make me wonder if maybe Nora Roberts just doesn't care anymore. It made me question a lot about big publishing, the editing staff and team, and I don't want to call any individual out in this book. When you look at something like this that's been professionally published through a big mainstream publishing company, you're looking at a lot of people with their hands in it. And when you're looking at something like this, it's by a big author like Nora Robert, someone who's trusted and who drives audiences all on her own, whether or not a book is good or bad. There's just a lot of hands in that. There's a lot of assumptions probably made by both publishers, editors, and I don't even know if editors are given a lot of final say with this. I don't know how much Nora Roberts is like,
I'm Nora Roberts, I do what I want.
The writing is bad, the editing was not good. I caught several grammar errors here, and also some research errors, and just like some notes I had in here about facts about Ireland, or facts about pubs, or even facts about plane travel that were just not true or real or feasible. And I do think some people might tell me like,
it's a fantasy, just go with it.
But here's the thing, this isn't just like a traditional romance book from Nora Roberts. This is going to be an urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy romance sort of story. We start off in a world that's very much like ours, and we go into like a fantasy dimension. So if you want me to believe the jump between the real world and the fantasy world, you want like the more crazy fantasy things to stand out and be impressive and be believable and something that I'm going to go with you on, go on this journey with you, then you really have to bring me the real and grounded elements in our world. There are so many things here that are not real. For starters, our main protagonist, Breen, by the way, is usually a last name and it means water. And I do think it's a nice touch that her name correlates to some elements of the story going forward. But anyways, our main protagonist, Breen, is a 26-year-old who lets her mother control her entire life. She's a very unhappy history teacher, and she's quiet, and she's shy, and she's imaginative, and she's an airhead, and she's very nervous and uncertain of herself. Honestly, I just hated it. She is 26 years old and still doing exactly what her mom tells her to do when her mom tells her to do it. She lives in an apartment separate from her mother and still lets her mother control like how late she stays out, what her career is, who she dates, how she thinks of herself and her relationships. And when we do meet mom and get a little bit of back and forth with her, she's not that bad. She's not that controlling or demanding or demeaning. So I feel like especially where Breen doesn't live with her anymore and hasn't lived with her for years, she had a real opportunity to strike out on her own and be her own person and find her own self-discovery way before now and not continually be cringing and imagining what her mom was like when she was like a preteen. But also, if you are making Breen 26, but you're still making her this young, kind of like teenage version of someone, keep that consistent. As soon as it's no longer convenient for Breen to be so shy and unsure of herself, she like is more certain, and it's explained as intuition, but it's really just character acting conveniently for plot. And a lot of Breen's friends are like,
you're beautiful and wonderful and blah blah blah.
Lots of things things like capable and strong, all this stuff that Breen hasn't shown us. I just say it all the time, wish it into reality or whatever is part of what this book is doing. We spend a long time with like Breen's friends and Breen's mom in the first third of this book. It drags. None of it matters at all. This book should be half this size, maybe a third this size. If Nora Roberts had an editor that had been allowed to go to town and do what editors do, which is polish and cut the fat, this book would not be this size. It's one of the reasons I think that whoever her team was really hamstrung by Nora Roberts herself. Her best friend Marco, who works at a bar, also is like a tech genius. He sets her up a blog website and a bunch of other things like, boom, super quick, while on an airplane with spotty Wi-Fi. And that's pretty amazing to me. On top of that, Breen's website/blog just takes off because good writing just comes to the surface and people just find it, online with no advertising and very little startup. That could just be like my jealousy and bitterness coming through because I've tried so many different blogging endeavors and so many different like YouTube videos and tweet things and books, and I think I'm a decent writer. I think I'm okay personality on camera, and I just don't get that much response from it. And maybe I'm not very good at editing, or maybe I don't know. It could be me, and maybe Breen doesn't have that problem, but it seems like Breen should have the same problems I'm having with it. Like, she in no way seems more talented or capable than any other person. Her success is not proportionate with her skills. It really pisses me off. The other thing is, like, I started reading this in February. By that point in time, I had stayed inside and been quarantined so long. I was so desperate for an escape. I thought if nothing else, I was gonna get like some beautiful landscapes and pub scenes and just like this nice travel kind of experience from this book. And I didn't even get that. Like, Ireland doesn't feel like Ireland, and I've never been to Ireland. I guess the problem is that we start in Philadelphia. I have been to Philadelphia, and nothing about the Philadelphia in this book reminds me of Philadelphia in real life. It's not distinct. And if you're not gonna ground it and set it so that we feel like we're in that city and moving there and experiencing things with Breen, then don't set it in the city. Set it in a suburb. Set it in a nameless town. Why were you specific that it was Philadelphia if you weren't gonna bring in any feeling or authenticity of that city? Once we went over to Ireland, I didn't trust that like we're really in Ireland either. And I did look up some of the information that's mentioned in this book. Like, at one point in time, Breen's like,
over there they still speak Irish.
And that struck me as strange because I thought in Ireland they spoke Gaelic. But as it turns out, there's Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaelic, which is sometimes colloquially known as Irish. And in fact, specifically at the Emerald Islands area of Ireland, it's referred to as Irish. And we were in the Emerald Islands area. So that part, good. But like the food in the pubs is like lasagna. There's no like authentic Irish food. There's no authentic Irish beers or Irish drinks. Breen had this drink I'd never heard of. I think it was a cur, something or other. Basically, it's champagne and elderberry liqueur. I went and I looked it up because I'd never heard of this drink before, and I'm familiar with a lot of drinks. It was very popular in the 80s, and it's French in origin. It's not Irish, just in case you're wondering. And I thought maybe the elderberry liqueur would come back into play because elderberries have an association with fae and fairy people. And we're in Ireland, so I assumed the magical realm was going to be fae or fairy. There's like this one dude who might be magical who has been kind of like stalking/watching Breen, and I sort of thought that he was going to be a fae something or other just because of his like description and abilities. So I was like, well, maybe the elderberry will come back into play, but it doesn't. This was a perfect time for you to give me a local Irish drink. Why would we be in a pub having something that has been popular since the 80s that originated in France? It's one of those times where Nora Roberts really shows her age. Like, this woman is like in her 70s trying to write what the hip young kids are doing today, and it's not coming off well. She doesn't know anything about what a 26-year-old would be like. Breen is like,
oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to live in a castle?
Like, yeah, live without technology, live with no working plumbing, live without electronics and equality and all these other things. No. No, there's no 26-year-old who says that.
A 26-year-old might be happy for a break from social media. They might want to get away for a little while, but I can guarantee you they don't want to live the rest of their lives without their phone or their laptop. And even in my age category, I would not want to go the rest of my life without access to the internet. Also, even though we're not quite at women's equality yet, where we're at, so much better than where we were at when we were living in castles. I don't want to go back to that time where I'm just married off without my say-so, and I just have to shut up and deal with it. I love indoor plumbing and indoor HVAC. Why would I go to a time and a place without that? It's so stupid. Nobody in the history of ever has wanted that. I guess except maybe Nora Roberts. I don't relate to Breen at all. I don't believe she's 26. I don't understand her wants or desires. I don't understand her character because it changes based off of plot convenience. It's taken me so long to get to the point. By the time we get to the fantasy element, I am already in a deeply uncharitable frame of mind because of how long it's taken, because of how much I hate these characters, because I hate the setting. I don't feel like we're in Ireland. I'm not relaxed, I'm not enjoying it, I'm not having a good time, I'm not getting to sightsee through my reading. Instead, I've been just like trying to force march finish this because I committed to a buddy read on it. Here I am though, we're finally at the fantasy elements. They're so flippin' stupid. I hate them. I hate the love interest. I hate the grandma. I hate the grandma's lover. I hate the story we go with for why Breen doesn't know about this world, how she was born into it, what happened to her dad. Actually, can we talk about Breen's dad for a minute? I guess spoilers. We're all in on spoilers. Here's the thing about Breen's dad. Number one, I don't understand why Breen was so hot to find him since he'd apparently abandoned her when she was a child. She hadn't seen or heard anything from him. Yeah, I get that he had sent her money and now she's like a sudden millionaire because of him, which I guess is nice, but that wouldn't have me going to search someone who had just left my life as a child out. Maybe that's just me, but like your presence is more important than the money. I guess if what you've offered me is the money, I'll take it, but I'm not going to look for you to thank you or catch up with you or get to know you. You made that choice when I was a kid, and as an adult, I'm going to respect that choice of yours. But I mean, I guess Breen feels like she's been betrayed or lied to by her mother, so she's just looking for any kind of family connection, so that's why she's looking for her father. But surprise, surprise, her father's dead. That's why he stopped talking to her. It would have been nice if like Grandma had sent a note that had at least explained that he had died, or Grandma had sent some kind of letters back and forth talking to Breen all this time. Or maybe Grandma had come out to visit Breen. That's never really adequately explained why Grandma couldn't or wouldn't do that. And it's never really adequately explained to me why her dad was just absent from her life. They say that like her dad was the leader and this like attack happened and they realized Breen wasn't safe in the magical world anymore, so they brought her back to Philadelphia. And Breen's dad, instead of going with them, the love of his life and the child who was the best thing in his world, he decides to keep being mayor of Magic Town. And this is played off like some kind of brave, epic, sacrificial thing. It's not. It's incredibly effing selfish of him. If he loved his family, he'd have gone with his family. If their society is so fragile that they need this dude to stay here and maintain order and control, then they don't have a good society. Their whole structure's effed. Just leave that to burn and go take care of your family. Short of being drafted as a soldier and forced to leave your family, there's no justification to me. And it's not something we should celebrate or uphold as a good, moral, ethical standard. Breen's dad is not a hero, he's not a nice guy, and he's not worthy of any kind of respect or celebration. I hate the way that Breen goes with it. Like,
oh, I love my dad. He was a real good guy. Hey, you're right, Grandma. He made the best choice.
Leaving you and your mom alone to fend for yourself was not the best choice. I really thought that it was possible that we were going into like some kind of cult classic movie, because Breen kind of like follows a dog and wakes up in a different world, but the world's not really that different than our human world. Did she just like stumble across the gates of a cult and they all like are having a joint hallucination about living in a different world and really all they're doing is living without electricity? I totally would have loved this book even its slow build into this, if we had seen like a slow process of Breen being broken down, brainwashed, and entered into a cult, and like we had closed with mom coming in and like the authorities to break down their doors and save her daughter, that would have been a great ending to this. But me accepting that this is a fantasy world and that somehow this fantasy world is more desirable than our world, and it doesn't seem to have anything that's appealing to me in it. Even the magic is not that appealing. It's not very well explained. And the witches are like a new age Wicca witch kind of scenarios. They do like all this triple goddess stuff and circle casting stuff, and I was like,
Is it like stuff from the 70s?
there's nothing wrong with Wicca or new age witches, and it's fine if those are your fantasy witches. Just don't pretend that this is some old ancient mother goddess cult. That's all I'm saying. Nora Roberts couldn't pick any one fantasy group, so she has like fairies and witches and shapeshifters, and they're all just kind of hodgepodge together. Ugh. I really wish you'd picked one of these magical races, or maybe two of them, honed in on them specifically, given me some real depth and lore and meat. Because as big as this book, and it's a lot of fluffy filler, I could rant about this book forever, and I could keep going on different side tangents, but I think I've hit some of the main things I didn't like about this book. That, and at the end, this book ends on a cliffhanger. And if I read 435 pages and you end me on a cliffhanger, I ain't coming back. This was a huge disappointment for me as a Nora Roberts fan, and it's a huge failing on like a paranormal / urban fantasy storytelling kind of genre as well. It doesn't even work as a romance because there's no happily ever after. There's just, or happily for now happening here. There's not even really like what I would consider any chemistry between any of these characters. Between Grandma and her shape-shifting cat that had been lovers for years, I didn't feel any chemistry. I didn't feel chemistry between Breen and her romantic interest. In fact, I really hated him. I found him really chauvinistic and condescending. And this was another scenario where I wondered if Nora Roberts is just too old to write books. She's just like out of touch. And I don't want to bag on old people because I know a lot of progressive people in their 70s who wouldn't make these same mistakes. But it felt like I was reading a book from someone who was deeply conservative and trying to imagine what the hip young kids were reading these days. I feel like I had to get this all off my chest. I had to say something about it because it's on my Goodreads. I think it's sitting at a 1 star. Maybe I was generous and gave it 2 stars. Every time I go into what I've read this year to see what the most popular or most read book is, it's staring at me. This is so much worse than so many independently self-published books. I read all kinds of books with all kinds of plot holes and grammatical errors and all sorts of issues, and somehow they have more spirit and interest than this book had. I just want people to know that traditional publishing, established authors, you can't replace a writer's passion or their own drive to tell a really good and compelling story. Nothing makes up for that, including, but not limited to, big names, big budgets, and big marketing promotions. I would really encourage people, if you're looking for romance, if you're looking for urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy, science fiction, anything in that spectrum, to check out some independent authors. And you can do that very cheaply through something like Kindle Unlimited, or even checking out like a local writers group in your area or a local readers group in your area. They're going to help you find some of those lesser known books that are going to have a lot more innovative and interesting takes, that are going to have shown a lot more dedication in their craft. They'll be a lot less of a hollow and soulless slog, even if they have some other imperfections in them. Have you read The Awakening? And if you liked it, please tell me why, because there wasn't a single thing about this book I liked, and I see the high rating on Goodreads, and I just want to understand it. Take me through that thought process with you. And if you enjoy me talking about stories from fantasy and science fiction genres, please go ahead and subscribe. I try to post videos twice a week, but I do always have at least one out each week. If you're looking for more paranormal, romance kind of things, I'm going to suggest my playlist here. And if you're looking for something that's more urban fantasy based, I have a playlist here. And if you're wondering about what kind of independent authors you can find on Kindle Unlimited and you wanted a little taste of that from the fantasy science fiction perspective, I would go ahead and suggest my Kindle Unlimited playlist that's here. And keep in mind, even the worst thing that's on that list, I think is way better than Nora Roberts' The Awakening. as always, keep reading, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!